This particular Thanksgiving was going to be a little bit extra special because my grandchildren, Nick and Haley, were going to be there. Nick was 17, Haley was 18. They were cousins and very, very close friends. Dinner was supposed to start at about 1 o'clock. Nick and Haley weren't there yet. We waited and waited and waited. It was about 2:30 or 3 o'clock before we finally just decided to sit down, and quite honestly, nobody really ate much. We were on phones texting Nick and Haley to find out where they were, and there was no answer, no answer, no answer. That was really frazzling everybody. There was a sense that something was not right. Never in my wildest dreams did I think what happened would have actually happened. I believe that evil took over that night.
The day after Thanksgiving, November 23rd, 2012. I was off work. We were sitting downstairs, my wife, Chrissy at the time, and my 9-year-old daughter, Haley, and we were watching a Christmas show. But I was always on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We don't have a huge department with a lot of people. In fact, there were only 2 investigators for the whole county. And the deputy told me that he received a strange call from a William Anderson saying that his neighbor, Byron Smith, had called the sheriff's office wanting to talk to an attorney. He said, well, Byron's been having some problems with some break-ins to his place, and I suspect he might have taken things way too far. When I heard this description, something just wasn't sitting right in my stomach. Smith lived just on the outskirts of town. It's approximately about a 5-minute drive from the sheriff's office to Byron Smith's residence. And Byron's house, incidentally, is at the dead end of Elm Street. When I pulled into the driveway, what I did notice as I'm pulling up to his attached garage is that there's no vehicles parked outside. I thought that was a little odd. Like, where's his vehicle? As I'm exiting my squad car, I see an older male come out of the house with messy gray hair, wearing a blue jean jacket and jeans that appeared like he slept in them, with his hands raised above his head. Well, that's not a normal thing that people typically do when I respond to their house to see if what kind of problems they're having. The hairs on the back of my neck were starting to stand out, and it's like, okay, now something more is possibly happening here. I asked him, are you Mr. Smith? And he said, yes, I am. Thoughts were racing through my head, trying to figure out, what do I do next? I said, I heard something happened at your house here. Is it okay if we come in and talk to you? So Byron opened the door and we walked into his residence. He was very calm. I didn't notice any erratic behavior or anything from him at the time. He was just matter of fact that somebody broke into his house. There was a window that had been shattered, and the glass was laying on the inside. What that indicated is that somebody had broken the window to gain entry into his house. Byron told us that the break-in happened on Thanksgiving Day. I thought that was a little odd when he told me that because he's not reporting it now until the day after Thanksgiving. So Byron wanted to show us something in the basement. And as I'm walking down the steps, I see the rug, and I see what looks like a spot of blood. Okay, that's kind of a red flag for me. Maybe something's going on here. His walls are white, and I see what looks like a speck of blood on the wall. Now the hairs are really starting to stand up on the back of my neck. It's like, what am I gonna find here? So we get to the bottom of the steps, and this chair was in an odd location. I don't know why somebody would set it up like that, but it was sitting between two bookshelves, very tall bookshelves. There were a bottle of water and some energy bars. And I also noticed that the light bulbs above the reading chair in the ceiling had been removed and were sitting in a pile. I'm like, wait, what's going on here? Why would somebody do that? Then he goes on to tell me that he's sitting in his reading chair, and he had heard somebody walking around the house outside. He heard somebody trying the doorknobs. Byron would have had ample time to make a phone call to law enforcement and report that, hey, somebody's looking to break into my house here. But he doesn't. He said, I see the footsteps coming down the stairs. And as he's coming down where I could see his hips, I fired. And I'm like, whoa, you fired. Now I'm just finding out he has a gun with him. Byron said, so I went and I sat back down in my reading chair. And he goes, as I'm sitting there, I hear somebody trying the door, and then I hear more footsteps coming down the hallway. He tells me that it felt like he was being ganged up on. Byron said that when he saw the hip area of this person, he shot again. And he used the word she, fell to the bottom of the stairs. And when I heard that, I'm like, oh my God, now a female party's involved? And I'm just like, whoa. I look over at the other deputy, and he's got this huge, holy crap expression on his face, which I'm sure is the same expression I had on my face at the time, because never heard something like this before. There obviously was something going on here, and I needed to figure out what the heck it was. But at that time, I had no idea the impact this case would have on my life, and that it would change our small community forever.
More together. I see them as vermin.
I'm asking myself, did I really hear this right? Did Byron Smith just admit to me that he had basically executed two people that had broke into his house? He's very calm about the whole thing, really, but I could tell that he was not giving me the full story. So as I'm looking at this little bit of blood that I did see in the spot where he told me that he shot these two people, it was very odd to me because there should have been a lot more blood in that area. As Mr. Smith is explaining these things to me, I could see blood now on his jacket, on his pants, and then also on his shoes. And this whole time, I haven't seen any bodies yet. I said, well, can you show me where the bodies are? And he goes, follow me. There's a closed door that leads back into his office workroom area. And sure enough, I see the bodies lying next to each other. I had no idea who these victims were, but I could see multiple gunshot holes in the body of the female party. The male party was wrapped in the tarp, and all I could see was his feet and jeans that he was wearing. And I said, Mr. Smith, when did this happen? And he told me, yesterday on Thanksgiving. I said, why did you not report this incident yesterday? And Smith looks at me and he says, well, just because my day was ruined, I thought, I don't want to wreck your guys' Thanksgiving.
The day was really a bust. At about 7 o'clock that evening, Thanksgiving evening, the rest of the kids were calling around, calling friends, trying to find out where Nick and Haley were.
On Thanksgiving 2012, I was preparing to have dinner with my family. I started to worry when I got a call from his sister wondering if I had heard from Nick at all. And that's kind of where I was like, okay, there's something obviously more going on here.
So it was not a good night.
Little Falls is a small town. 2 teenagers don't go missing.
Well, Little Falls is your typical slow-paced town. Population right around about 8,000.
We're 2 hours from the Twin Cities. It's just kind of its own little corner of Minnesota.
But Little Falls doesn't have a lot for the younger kids to do.
What teenagers do here, get in trouble, honestly.
I was actually supposed to hang out with Nick that morning, and I just never heard from him. We hung out a lot, and I do mean a lot. I would call him more like a brother to me than a friend. If you're having a bad day and Nick is there, you're not gonna have a bad day for long. He's gonna find a way to get you to smile and cheer up, even if you don't want to. Nick was really good at changing the mood into a positive way. There's not a whole lot of people that had a bad time with him around.
To be really honest, Nick lit up a room. Haley was always polite, always gracious. She just had that nice air about her. There was something with Haley that, you wouldn't expect her to be rude to anybody. Just genuinely nice. It was so out of character for Nick and Haley to not respond. Just unthinkable. Where are you? We couldn't file a missing persons claim for 24 hours, so we had to wait till the next day.
The whole time I'm thinking, okay, has a crime been committed here? I knew that Mr. Smith had the legal right to defend himself. He had the legal right to use lethal force in his home. Minnesota law states that. But the problem, what I see, was these people were not armed. So I had to make the ultimate decision to place him under arrest. Mr. Smith's answer to me was, yes, I understand. I know you're just doing your job. And as I'm going around the outside of the house, I noticed surveillance cameras that were set up. So that was an indication to me that, hey, there's possibly some video recording of this incident that I could get.
Back at the station, deputies had Byron Smith in an interview room and said they'd be right back. So they had him in the room by himself. and they were watching him through double-sided glass. They needed to figure out if Smith was telling the whole truth, if this really was self-defense, or if this was cold-blooded murder.
In the meantime, we got a call from 2 Minnesota State Patrol officers. They said, we noticed something odd. A vehicle was parked in front of our residence here on Thanksgiving Day yesterday, and we have no idea whose vehicle it is. So they ran the license plate on the truck, and it came back to Byron Smith. Why in the heck is Smith's vehicle parked a quarter mile away in front of some state patrol officer's house?
Early on, as information was trickling out, people were for sure taking Smith's side. People felt connected to defending their property. It was, kind of this rumor mill that ended up turning into pretty big news, and everyone was picking a side. It was becoming a powder keg situation. And the story was going to get pretty crazy. Byron Smith had just admitted that he had shot 2 people in his basement, claiming self-defense. But they're not sure if he's telling the whole truth.
After I arrested Byron Smith, our sheriff's office dispatch received a phone call from the parents of 2 juveniles, 17-year-old male party by the name of Nicholas Brady and his 18-year-old cousin, Haley Kiefer. It was reported that both juveniles are missing over a day now. Well, we got a description of both of them, and it seemed to add up and match pretty close to the juveniles that we had currently in the basement at Smith's house.
We live out in the country, and this vehicle pulls down our long driveway. We were actually hopeful that it was Nick and Haley. My wife, Bonnie, looked out our window and saw that it was the chaplain, and she knew something was not right. The deputy and the chaplain told us that Nick and Haley had both been shot burglarizing a house. No more details other than that. My first thought was, why would you break into a house? And it was just devastating. Losing my grandson, losing Haley for something that both knew better. No Thanksgiving has been the same since then. So, trying to get myself calm here.
Back at the station, deputies were watching Byron Smith, trying to figure out what is going on inside his head.
I looked through the two-way mirror at Smith. He's sitting there, he's getting a little restless, getting a little antsy, because now it's been a little while. So I sit down with Byron.
Byron, the reason that led up to why you were placed under arrest was explained to you at the scene, is that correct?
Because there were bodies, and that's a good reason.
What I knew about Byron Smith is that he's a 64-year-old retired man that lived alone.
Do you live at the residence with anybody, or do you live by yourself?
I am by myself. My mother passed away 3 years ago.
He told me that the house was his family home that he grew up in. He initially had been working overseas, installing surveillance cameras in embassies throughout the world. That's what he did for a living.
Smith was a bit of a loner. Didn't have a lot of visitors come to his home. But that summer of 2012, decided to hire someone to come take care of his lawn. Several boys were cutting his grass. Nick Brady ended up being one of those kids that came over to do lawn work for him. During that time, that's when Byron started to notice things were missing, including his POW watch and a bomber jacket. And that's when he fired him and told him never to come back to his house. But by October 2012, his house was still getting broken into. He was clearly angry. I mean, anybody would be angry if their house was broken into continually. Like, he kind of became this target. And at one point, some arrests were made. But it just, in his mind, wasn't what he imagined should happen to someone who was breaking into his home. And so he went from trying to get the law to help him to taking the law into his own hands. Like, I'm gonna deal with this myself. So he had surveillance cameras all around the outside of his house. In one camera he had facing there where his property line was, you could see one of his neighbors' homes. And that happened to be the one neighbor who he was convinced was breaking into his home.
During Smith's interview, he tells me that he's never gotten along with his neighbors, the Williams next door.
I have tried very hard to avoid them. They're nasty people.
Okay.
And he suspected that it was the Williams' daughter that was involved in previous burglaries.
So you suspect that Ashley Williams had been breaking into your place on different occasions. Is that correct to say?
Yes. Ashley Williams was seen wearing my military jacket from the Air Force to school.
And so he went from being a victim to being a vigilante.
Smith told me that he thought he had killed Ashley Williams, the girl that lived next door to him.
I shouldn't have been involved. I shouldn't have even been brought up. I shouldn't be here right now doing this interview. Once upon a time, it was a good place to live on Elm Street. But Byron Smith is a cruel, heartless man. He had a deep hate towards me. I didn't feel safe being his neighbor. I live in fear, knowing it was supposed to be me. I felt it important to get my story out there, my truth, because I don't know what tomorrow brings. My thought on hiding my identity was because I was absolutely victimized by Byron Smith. And I would like to not be a victim or feel like a victim anymore. His claims were very absurd, 100% not true. As far as my record for breaking and entering any place is null and void. I have never stole from anybody, and I would never. When I was in grade school, I went down to his house to sell him cookies for the school, and he didn't want nothing to do with it. That was the one and only time I ever been to his house. I didn't feel safe being his neighbor. Growing up, I had cats and a family dog go missing because they went onto his property, and I think that he killed them because of that. I wish I knew why he had so much anger towards me.
When Byron Smith's house started being broken into in October of 2012, he made her the bad guy and invented this whole plan of vengeance against this girl. But it actually made no sense. She didn't actually live there at the time. The timeline of when his jacket went missing didn't actually make sense. She would have been a baby at the time. So I would say his mental state was shaky at best. A lot of his peers talked about how he had a bit of a short temper. He was becoming a very disturbed individual, and it was becoming a powder keg situation. It was only a matter of time before he was gonna explode.
On Thanksgiving Day?
Yeah, about 12 o'clock. I was in the basement in my favorite reading chair reading a paperback, and I hear the steps come down the hallway, turn around and come down the stairs. Then I saw his feet, and then I saw his legs, and when I saw his hips, I shot.
He said he fell down the stairs and was laying wounded at the bottom of the stairs.
And he's looking face up at me. Okay, then what? I shoot him in the face. I want him dead. There was a lot of blood, and I had a tarp. I pulled him on the tarp to keep so much blood from soaking into the carpet. I just wanted it out of my sight, and I dragged him around the corner into the shop.
And he goes, as I'm sitting there, a little while later, I hear more footsteps descending the stairs.
I wasn't thinking. I was just, they're ganging up on me. So I killed her too.
He says, Ashley Williams fell to the bottom of the stairs, and she's wounded.
And I walked over to finish her off.
Again, he said, well, I just want her dead. I take my rifle, I point it at her.
It jammed, trigger clicked, and she laughed at me. She laughed at me. I was far over the edge.
You could see almost that when people describe him as being a bullied kid, you could see that come out in that moment. You know, it's like he heard things that didn't really happen.
Okay, there's another red button. If you're trying to shoot somebody and they laugh at you, you go again.
So I grabbed my pistol I had at my side, I aimed at her chest, and I shot, and I shot, and I shot.
She was still doing some faint gasping. And as much as I hate someone, I don't believe they deserve pain. And I don't want to give Lance on her. So I did a good, clean finishing shot. And she gave out the death twitch. First time I've ever seen it in a human, but it works the same in beaver and deer and whatever. Okay.
And I'm like, wow. He said when she quit moving, I then grabbed her and laid her on the tarp next to him. And he said, I just sat with the bodies in the basement, fearful that the Williams family was going to come over with firearms, you know, to kill me.
I would describe Byron Smith as like kind of a Norman Bates type character, like Norman Bates from the movie Psycho. If you've ever seen the end of Psycho where he's kind of just sitting in a rocking chair, just super calm, watching the fly around the room. But in his head, he's having a psychotic break. He's already killed people. That was kind of Byron's demeanor a lot of the time. Like just not wanting to break in front of people. But then at any moment, he could snap.
It was vitally important that we keep Smith in custody, or there's a strong likelihood that somebody else could be shot and killed. After I finished my interviews with Byron, I drafted up 5 separate search warrants. From the search warrant at Smith's house, we found out that he had moved the rugs at the bottom of the steps where I initially was talking with Byron. What they discovered was brain matter, pools of blood, and also blood marks dragging across the carpet that led back to his office workroom. So it appeared very deliberate and intentional on Byron's part that he had taken those rugs and covered up the spot. Well, I was in the back office workroom where the bodies were, and I found a digital handheld audio recorder sitting on top of his desk back there. And we found the same exact type of recorder hidden in the bookshelf above his reading chair. I had this odd feeling in the pit of my stomach. And what we found was the holy grail piece of evidence in this case. It recorded a monologue of Byron Smith basically rehearsing what he was going to do if anybody broke into his house.
I realize I don't have an appointment, but I would like to see one of the lawyers here. No rush, but, as convenient for you.
Over and over again, practicing saying, I think I need to speak to an attorney.
No rush, but, when it's convenient for you. No rush, but as soon as convenient.
Just insane.
And it turns out that recorder actually recorded everything.
Nick.
I had 5 separate search warrants in hand. And I met with the county attorney at Byron Smith's house. There were some very important key pieces of evidence that we needed to get in this case. What we found in the surveillance videos was that around 11 a.m. on Thanksgiving Day, Smith went outside and got into his pickup and drove the pickup away. A little while later, we saw him walking back through the woods to his house, hiding his vehicle away from the house to make it look like nobody was home. We have a lot of deer hunters in Minnesota, and this is what we do. We sit in a deer stand, and we have food and water in that so we can sit for the long haul and wait for the prey to come in. Well, that's what it seemed like Byron did.
To be sitting in your basement in the middle of the day in complete darkness, waiting for someone to break into your house and to make it appear that you're not home so that they want to come in, so that you can kill them, is like another level of depravity.
What we captured on that digital recorder paints the perfect picture of what I basically suspected when I placed Smith under arrest, is that this was a murder and not self-defense. When Nick initially came in, you can hear the window break. You can hear the footsteps descend down the stairs. And then you hear the initial one shot. Now he's laying there wounded. Then you hear a final shot where Byron shot Nick in the head.
You're dead.
You can hear the body dragging across the floor to his back office room. A little while later, we see Nick's cousin Haley come walking up to the house, but then that's the last thing we see of her on video. Smith said that he went and sat back down in his chair, but what he didn't tell me was he had actually reloaded his gun. 11 minutes later, Haley came in the house. When she got to the top of the stairs, you could actually hear Haley whisper.
Nick.
She slowly started to descend the stairs looking for her cousin. That's when you hear. Now she's laying there wounded. Smith says he goes to finish her off. He aims the gun at her. That's when his rifle jammed on him.
Oh, sorry about that.
When Smith told me that Haley was laughing at him, that was a lie. She was pleading for her life.
You're dying. Bitch. Bitch.
He wrapped both of their bodies in tarps and just kept them there overnight. He had no regard for their remains, just totally disconnected himself from them as humans, much less kids. It'd be awful to happen to anybody, but the fact that they were children was really, really just disturbing.
They weren't human. I don't see them as human. I see them as vermin.
So he was initially charged with 2 counts of second-degree murder, and then a grand jury was convened, and they agreed that he should be charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder.
When this broke, there was only a couple reporters covering it. It was me and Morrison County Record. I mean, I'd say hi to him in the morning. Byron Smith comes across as a really kind person. He's very quiet and has a very soft demeanor, but then when he feels cornered or he feels humiliated, something happens. There is another person that just comes out, and he just, it's scary.
During the trial, I listened to the recordings. They still haunt me. I learned that he was targeting me, which to me was a blindside, and to this day it affects me.
Sitting in the courtroom, listening to that, I've been angry. I've never experienced rage in my life. Listening to him talk about my grandson and Haley that way, I literally could have gotten up and attacked him right in the courtroom.
He's a monster. No regular human being could go to that extent. I don't know any way to put it besides a monster.
He just wanted to be judge, jury, and executioner. Haley was looking for Nick. She was not a perpetrator. I don't believe that she was doing anything other than searching for her cousin. And she certainly bore the brunt of Smith's rage.
In the Little Falls trial of Byron Smith, the man charged with killing 2 people in his own home, 2 very different pictures are painted by the prosecutor and defense.
Smith's defense attorneys are trying to see if self-defense holds up.
And jurors in the Byron Smith case will now consider 4 counts, 2 of which are first-degree murder.
Smith was tried and convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced to prison for the rest of his life.
I would say it set a precedent for Minnesota case law here and just how self-defense works.
The news media really hyped this case up about the Castle Doctrine law, and it became national news.
You're in your home, you're broken into, you can shoot the intruder to protect yourself. This is called the Castle law in Minnesota.
It was very divided. We would get a parade of cars past our house, people harassing us. Well, that was very hard on my family. My wife finally had enough and wanted a divorce, and I ended up getting divorced.
I remember going into town and a couple of people made some hurtful comments that, this was my fault or this was my family's fault. There's times when I actually have a bulletproof vest that I wear. I had people stalking me, so.
I would read online the people that sided with Byron and their opinions about Nick and Haley. I just wish at the time that I could tell my story. He is a cruel, heartless man.
I think we paint this picture that this town is divided. I just think that this town is sad.
For people who pay attention to the news, there's always 2 sides to the story. Be open-minded enough to get both sides. Mr. Smith wanted revenge, and he didn't care how he got it. I've had properties broken into before, and you feel violated, but it's stuff. Stuff can be replaced. Taking a human life is way, way different than that.
If I could talk to Nick or Haley, I'd probably tell them both that I miss them, and everybody down here misses them, and it ain't the same.
My hope for Nick would have been that he had consequences for his actions, that he learned from them, and that he moved on. Haley would have found true happiness. She was such a nice young lady that, if she would have chosen to get married, there'd be 100 guys out there that would be dying to marry her. Nick's personality would have gotten him certainly high places. Do I miss them? Every day. There isn't a day goes by that I don't think about them with a smile on their face.
I was screaming, my dad's dead, someone's killed him.
You have a murder on Halloween on Elm Street. Is there a connection to Halloween?
It's the violence that really, really hurts.
He's gonna get rid of loose ends. We wanted to find these people before somebody else was going to get killed.